Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Our Week 11 reaction presented by Uber Eats. Get game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. Okay, here we go on a Sunday. Buffalo 30, Kansas City 21 in the epic best rivalry in the NFL. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout with the Philadelphia Eagles, is joining us. So I'll start with this, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks. This team's the best equipped to beat Kansas City. First of all, they have their best running game with James Cook, best running back they've had. I think they have an interesting group of receivers, and they now have two tight ends, although Kincaid banged up. But, Amari Cooper made several nice plays today. They've got the slot guy. We know they're going to be well coached defensively because of Sean McDermott. And as I watched this game, I thought Kansas City would win because there was so much talk of injuries to Buffalo receivers. But, most of them showed up and played. And my take is we all kind of knew Buffalo was going to win one of these games. And I think this Buffalo team at home, I kind of felt like this team can beat anybody, including KC.
Listen, I think we talk about the Chiefs owning them because they beat them in the playoffs last year and then a couple years ago in that 13-second game. The Bills have now beat them 3 straight regular seasons. Now, 2 of those, I think, back-to-back years have been in Buffalo. Definitely 2 of the 3 of them. Yeah. So, they play well against them. There's no disputing. I'm sure we'll get into Lamar later. Lamar against the Chiefs looked like a different player. Josh Allen has played really, really well against the Chiefs, regular season and in the playoffs. I mean, today, is this game really as close if he doesn't make that disastrous decision on that 4th down where he just threw that ball up and then it led to a Chiefs touchdown, which
that's right.
They struggle to score. I mean, so he doesn't turn it over right there. Let's say they kick a field goal. I mean, do they have 21 points at the end of the day? I mean, this is a team that struggles to score points, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's a problem. Now, playoff games look like this, and they were 9-0, and their margin for victory in a lot of these games are coming down but that's how a lot of playoff games, they're going to be very equipped and because they're coaching, because they're quarterback. But listen, Buffalo and maybe it's Pittsburgh now more than the Ravens. These games, it's there for the taking. It is wide open. Can we say that? It's wide open in the AFC.
Yeah, and I think, it's funny watching. When I look at Josh Allen, nobody thinks Brady was the most talented quarterback. We all know Marino was more talented. Tom gets 7 rings. Marino gets none. And Dan had a great coach in Don Shula. So we know that winning Super Bowls is not just on talent. But if you're asking me the most talented quarterback I've ever seen, that last touchdown round by Josh Allen, there's not 3-4 quarterbacks ever. Maybe Steve Young makes that. I don't know if Mahomes can run over 2 defenders at the goal line. Josh is about size, arm, ad-libbing, pocket. With Lamar, he loses in the playoffs, and we're like, he's a different quarterback. We don't say that with Josh. It's like, he threw for 400 yards and came up short. I'm watching him today. He had one really terrible throw. Mahomes had a bad pick early. It's like, I guess Marino, John Elway, Josh Allen, Montana and Brady have the rings. I don't think they're the most talented quarterbacks. They have 2 of the best coaches. I think Josh is the MVP. There's just nothing he doesn't have a comp to me.
Well, think about this of the internet era. I mean, Brady's the best quarterback of all time, and Peyton Manning's the top 5 quarterback of all time, and neither one was the most talented quarterback of their era. That was Aaron Rodgers, right? But he wouldn't rank ahead of either guy. I think, John Elway forever was like the perfect player because he could move. Yeah. And I think Josh Allen has entered into that because part of the way they also checked all the boxes, right? Work ethic, leader of the team, teammates loved him. Monday through Saturday was fantastic. I said it coming into this season, and I stand by it. I think he's the 2nd best quarterback in the NFL. And obviously, a lot of people come at you like, well, because he's having a better season up until today than he was last year when he won the MVP. Well, part of it last year was an awful MVP class. And listen, Lamar's also, I don't know, one of the greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen. So, but the one thing that he still leaves to be desired is playing really well and the lights are the brightest those first couple weeks in January.
Well, I mean, if you look at
that is not a question with Josh. He's been dominant in the playoffs at
if
times.
you look at Lamar against Kansas City and Pittsburgh, he's bad. His passer rating is like 66. Josh is never bad. I mean, he'll have a bad Sunday, but I kind of looked at this game, and it goes to show, and we know this in the Super Bowl last several years. Defense, as good as Spags' defense is, when Josh Allen is running out in the end and running over guys, it just doesn't matter what the scheme is. The great ones, and Josh is an all-timer. Elway had at one point, I don't know what he ended with, like 44 game-winning drives in the fourth. He played some of the best defenses, the great defensive coordinators. You know, you couldn't stop Kobe or MJ or LeBron when they wanted it. I just look at Josh, and he's a scheme buster. If he's got the right components, there's not much you can do.
Well, he's Cam Newton as a runner because of his power and his size, but he's such a dominant passer. I mean, I think he has a chance. I mean, he's got a long runway the rest of his career to go down as one of the better players of all time. Now, you get to find, you know, in football, like in most pro sports, how you do in the playoffs. And, you know, it's not, he hasn't lost them games. I mean, their defense has obviously let them down in some playoff games, but the pretty good opportunity this year, right? Like the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't scoring many touchdowns. The Ravens have a lot of flaws. They just beat the Chiefs. Now, home field advantage is very, very big for Buffalo. I mean, they had it last year and they blew it to Kansas City, but they were the favorite in that game. Now, the Chiefs get the Panthers next week. So they still have a one-game cushion on the Bills. But think about this. You know, you live back in the Northeast for a lot of the Brady era. The Bills, I would say, of the internet age, before Josh got there, were mainly a joke. I mean, they were really, really bad. You could look at him a little bit like Mahomes is one of the greatest players I've ever seen in any sport. I'm not diminishing anything he's done, but he did take over a team that was winning 10, 11 games. He just took them to 13, 14 in Super Bowls.
Right.
Josh Allen arrived. This team was a joke. You know, it was an embarrassment. So it was, you know, you get more credit. I'm not saying like just as an individual in a vacuum, like that's really, really impressive what he's done. Same with Sean McDermott elevating this franchise. Because they're like, obviously the Chiefs are much more accomplished, but in terms of rest of the league, how many, you know, we talk about the Ravens, we hold them to such high regard, or the Pittsburgh Steelers haven't won a playoff game in close to a decade. I mean, look at the Bills' success. They are dominating. They're a shoo-in for their division every year. And honestly, they're a coin flip to like, are they going to be the 1 or 2 seed every year?
Well, yeah, I mean, and what if Allen gets drafted by the Chiefs and Mahomes goes to the Bills? You know, a prime example this year, and we'll get to this later, is Bo Nix. Bo Nix has torn it up. Bo Nix now has 4 games completing over 70%, no picks, 2 touchdowns. That's tied for the greatest rookie season accomplishment ever. Well, a huge component to that, about 75% of that is Sean Payton. I mean, Caleb Williams with a defensive coach and a defensive culture, he's more talented than Bo Nix. So I think, but I will say this. I don't think anybody holds it over the head of Josh Allen. I think we all know Mahomes is great and Andy's helped a lot. And I think we all know Josh Allen's great and he doesn't have Andy Reid. And I think Sean McDermott's terrific. And I really do. I think Sean McDermott, I've compared him, you may not remember this much, Chuck Knox, who was great everywhere he was at. He was great in Seattle, Buffalo, Rams, won everywhere, just not in the postseason. But he was meticulous in his details. So Chuck Knox would come into your organization, John, and it was like Marty Schottenheimer. He would just clean it up. Yeah. Just overnight, would clean it up. He was like the janitor with a headset. Like he immediately, your special teams got good, your defense got good, you didn't turn the ball over. Then Schottenheimer and Chuck Knox and a little bit Sean McDermott get into the playoffs and they get outworked. They get schemed by a great offensive coach. It can be a Bill Walsh, whoever it is. And I kind of feel McDermott is his generation's Chuck Knox. Great coach, attention to detail, tough. Teams are resilient, always in the big games. But Chuck Knox, Marty Schottenheimer, you're always like, they get a little conservative in the postseason. And I think that's a fair criticism of McDermott, but I'll defend him forever. He's a hell of a coach.
Yeah. Listen, I've known him since I worked with the Eagles. You know, he's a tightly wound, very disciplined individual. I bet if you looked at his breakfast and lunch orders for the last 15 years, they have probably been very similar. But Nick Saban's had the same breakfast for 25 years. I mean, these guys, they're very militaristic with their actions. I do think Sean looks like he's eased up a little bit. And let's face it, he made a move, whatever, a year and a half ago that has paid dividends of the Dorsey Joe Brady thing. I mean, I think the AFC, like this Chiefs team, now they do get Pacheco back, which is going to help, but Kareem Hunt's been good for them.
Yeah.
Just offensively, that Worthy's a 170-pound rookie. Like, he's going to be a lot better in a year or two than he is now. And Travis, let's face it, like the guy that we saw in those playoffs last year, which was the Hall of Fame dominant version, I think it's fair to go, does that guy still have it in him for this stretch run? Maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't. And I think if the Bills are healthy on offense, because you add Coleman, the rookie, you add Amari Cooper, if Kincaid's healthy, their running game clearly is a lot better. I mean,
yes,
you've been hammering this all, that balance of their team, control the clock. I mean, at one point in time, headed in the fourth quarter, it was basically a 1-to-1 ratio of time of possession. It was like these two teams were equal, which the Bills couldn't play that style, I felt like 2 years ago, of what Andy Reid has morphed himself into because he's had to. Like they said today on the broadcast, Kareem Hunt, since he showed up, the only guy in the league that had more carries than Kareem Hunt was Derrick Henry. Andy Reid's known for passing it too much. He brings his old buddy off the street because he has no choice. That their passing game, that their offensive line and pass protection is not great. And the one thing I would say, Mahomes has some historic like runs, like individual runs, but he's not as like dynamic of a runner as Josh.
No,
right?
No.
And that's an element. Remember, Josh last year in the playoffs was awesome against the Chiefs. Today, like, he's given them more fits as a runner than Lamar has, which is somewhat ironic, right? I mean, that playoff game last year, it's like, Lamar, take off, run around. The Chiefs are vulnerable that way because their DBs, while great cover guys, they're not exactly, Cam Chancellor's back there. Josh runs right through them.
Yeah. By the way, the Bills, more total yards, first down, time of possession, not necessarily close by the end of the game. They came out more aggressive. I think, I think you started this off by saying Buffalo does beat Kansas City, not in late January and February, right? Like that's where we judge you. But if you said right now, in the last 5 years, who's the best team in the league, we would all say Kansas City. Who's second best? We would probably have to say San Francisco and Buffalo. And by the way, neither has a ring. It's a little Phil Mickelson in Tiger's prime. It's a little Sacramento Kings in the Lakers, Kobe and Shaq. So I think I kind of felt good, the Bills winning today. It's like, guys, this is a really great team. They're the AFC San Francisco. The difference is the one area they've always been great is quarterback. There have been other issues, the O-line, the secondary in a couple of these matchups has been banged up. The receiving core is a little banged up today, but they go on to win. And
I think that Amari Cooper move for them just balances them out a little bit too, because it felt like they had become more run heavy. And now, Amari's, battling through a little wrist injury, had an awesome catch over the top. Shakir, the Boise State kid's awesome over the middle. Coleman's just a big body red zone target. Their tight end, when healthy, is obviously a good player. And then the Josh running it. Like the Bills, like their offense is pretty complete if everyone's healthy, which is obviously the big question for any NFL team. And their defense, like you said, well coached, and their pass rush is good. Like they have good pass rushers.
So Brady dominated Peyton Manning in the early years of their rivalry. And then at the end, Peyton did pretty well. And I kind of feel like
it flipped a little bit, didn't it?
It flipped. And I'm thinking to myself, you start looking at that, you look at that Buffalo roster and you're like, their defense isn't as good as Kansas City, but shit, Buffalo's got weapons. I mean, they got number one receivers, 2 tight ends, 3 receivers I like. It's like, are we going to get a little flip of the script? And this is generally how it works. Maybe not in golf or tennis where a Djokovic can dominate, guys get into their prime. But, Brady at the end, Peyton at Indy, Peyton goes to Denver. You're like, yeah, he's got better players.
I would say the one thing with these AFC teams, probably more than the NFC, though, Detroit, clearly tough wherever they're playing, but at home because of the dome. Whoever gets the home field and whoever has home field, even if it's the 2-3 matchup in the second round, I mean, these are massive home field advantages, right? Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Buffalo, like that's the difference. Like you felt it today. And honestly, you felt it in that playoff game. So I bet on Buffalo last year in the playoffs because I'm like, this is a perfect spot for them. halfway through, you're feeling good. In Kansas City, like you said, they just went on that Jordan Tiger-like run. Like, listen, you would be crazy to ever bet against Mahomes and Andy, but Belichick lost to Rex Ryan in a playoff game.
It happens.
He lost to Denver. You don't win it every year. Honestly, it's borderline impossible to win back-to-back. Aren't they the first team to do it since the early 2000s in New England?
Nobody's ever done it 3 times. And I grew up with the Steelers, who had like 9 Hall of Famers, and eventually the Shula or the Raiders, somebody knocks you off. It's the way it works.
Walsh and Montana only went back-to-back one time. Hell, they only, I think, ever got back-to-back Super Bowls one time.
So congrats to the Buffalo Bills. Okay, this game is fascinating. Pittsburgh 18, Baltimore 16. So Pittsburgh played a cleaner, more boring game, but the Ravens had 12 penalties. They lost 2 fumbles. They made more mistakes. And once again, God, the Ravens switch identity. So they were running 52% of the time this year, Baltimore. In this game, 33 passes, just 19 runs. And the entire game was a 1-possession game. And it felt like, again, they did this in the playoffs last year. Baltimore gets pass happy in these big spots. And let me look it up here. Derrick Henry had 65 yards. It's like, guys, you can pass, but your identity is you're slightly run-centric. Not run-centric, you're run-leaning. Today, they did this in the playoff game. I'm like, well, you're within a possession. It's almost like they panicked a little. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually thought early in the game when Tucker had missed multiple field goals and they fumbled on their first drive and the Steelers were only up 7-6 with a little time remaining in the first half, I'm like, this is not going to be good because they're going to come alive. But for whatever reason, Lamar kind of looks like a different player against them. He is so much better, I think, this year. For that stretch, the last 5 or 6 weeks, than he was even last year. Statistically, he's on a different planet. And then you're watching him today, you're like, I don't know. He's just frenetic. He's not. Now, obviously, their pass rush is good. TJ Watt throws him off, even when he's breaking the tackles. But they were a flawed, dominant team because defensively, they really struggled to defend the pass, Baltimore. But when their offense is going to hit the skids, to lose to a team, and I get it, this is your bitter rivalry, and the statistics of these two teams playing, it's determined over the course of, I think, like the last 10 games by like a plus-minus margin of a couple points. But the Steelers did not score a touchdown. And you guys weren't ever really have a chance, but like you said, the score, sometimes offensive coordinators get away from the run. Even when, if you're watching the game, you feel one team's in control, but there's a difference of being in control, like the Detroit Lions today when they're up 35-6. You're like, yeah. And there's a difference of like, you're only down 12-7 here. Let's take a deep breath.
John, Russell had a terrible pick in the end zone.
Worst throw of the day, I'd say, that I saw.
Terrible. He was only 23 of 36. Neither quarterback played well. Russell didn't play well. Najee Harris, 3.5 yards a run. So now George Pickens and Russell Wilson, this is where you really have to credit Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. That thing is a real relationship now. It's a top 5 like combo thing in the league right now. Pickens and Russell Wilson, 8 catches, 11.5 yards a catch. Like, it's a thing. But Russell didn't play. If I'm the Steelers, I'm like, we didn't play very well. It was Russell's worst game. He had probably the worst interception he's had in years. We didn't score a touchdown. But you just said something. There is something about Lamar now is 4-12 against Kansas City and Pittsburgh with more turnovers than touchdowns. It's not that he's losing. It's okay if you lose. He is a different player against the Chiefs and against the Steelers. And my takeaway with him is the more you face Lamar, the easier it gets. This is why he's so dominant against the NFC. It's almost like,
it's not even fair. It's like Superman.
It's like, in a weird way, it's like facing a knuckleball pitcher. Like in his prime, the late Tim Wakefield. If you never faced a great knuckleball pitcher, you don't know what the hell it is. Like, you just don't, there's like one in the league at any one time. And then if all of a sudden you faced a knuckleball pitcher 4 to 5 times a year, you get around on it. And I feel like with Lamar, I remember talking to Tom Telesco when he was the Chargers GM, and they played him. I was at the game. They played him at that soccer stadium and lost.
Yeah.
Then they played him the second time in the playoffs and won. And he just said he's so much faster in person than he is on film. Like your players, you play him, and then you're like, okay, we really can't get away with that. We wondered if we could. So it's like, listen, Pittsburgh has his number.
Well, I would say over the last couple of years, going back to last year, most teams that step on the field with Baltimore are inferior, and there's an intimidation factor.
Yes.
And there are definitely two teams. I mean, Pittsburgh, that game today had a couple of moments where you thought you were going to get like a 90s throwback, like brawl on the field, which was, it was refreshing. Yeah. I mean, it was like these teams, in a day and age where everyone's buddies, they all go on each other's podcast. You're like, feels like the NFL I grew up on, where it's like these two teams hate each other. Pittsburgh is not intimidated by him at all. Like you said, they understand his speed. They also do a pretty good job of corralling him. I mean, their team speed is fantastic.
Excellent.
TJ Watt's a dominant player. I just think for whatever reason, there is just not, you're gonna roll us. And I think the Bills have that against Kansas City, where there's an intimidation factor the moment you start warming up and you see the other colored jerseys.
When I really noticed it? When Baltimore went for 2. So Lamar Jackson going for 2 is feels about as, honestly, it's about as safe a bet in the league for 2.
And they run that play a lot where he starts running, he gets in easily. I've seen it 10 times.
It's insane. And I'm thinking, but Pittsburgh has seen it so many times when the ball was snapped that you could have run a dive play. They didn't care. They had 9 of their 11 players on the edge. They're like,
going lateral.
We know what you're going to do. You're going to go, you're not going to go at us. You're going to go to the side. And I thought that 2-point conversion, I'm like, because I kept thinking, oh boy, they don't even buy the fake. They don't even care about the fullback on the field. They know it's Lamar on the edges.
One concerning thing for Pittsburgh, who obviously is right there with Buffalo. I mean, their record's fantastic. What are they, 8-2 after today? So you got 2 8-2 teams and a 9-1 team. And that loss to the Raiders now for Baltimore is a pretty big swing loss, because now they got 4 losses. When they throw the ball outside the numbers and he throws it deep, he's good at it, right? Russell's comfortable throwing it to Pickens. I would say any rollout to the tight end,
yes,
they have a good connection. But when there has to be something a little more quick hitting, he held the ball a couple times and he got sacked. It's like, it's kind of a feast or famine. And against the Ravens, it's harder to just, I think Najee Harris has really resurrected his career. I think he looks a lot better this season than he has most of his career. Jalen Warren's a good player, but you're not just going to gash them for 150 yards, because I think they're the best statistical run defense coming in the league, or definitely, this week, one of them is, Russell can be had if you can just neutralize their deep passing game, because he will hold on to the ball. And that's a couple times he had some bad sacks where I thought, bro, you got to get rid of this. And it could have cost them, but they were lucky. The Ravens just had the Ravens looked off. It's weird because when you watch them, when they're right on offense, it looks like one of the greatest offenses you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But in some of these games, it's just like, they got a little like LSU, Brian Kelly thing going on. You're like, things are just a little out of whack. It's like, a ton of good players. I'd want 90% of their roster, but you watch them today, you're like, and maybe it's Pittsburgh. I've seen them play inferior teams with being off. It's weird.
It's interesting. I want to go back to the thing you said about Russell Wilson. That was the knock that I think Sean Payton really had on Russell, is that Sean would diagram plays that were over the middle and Russell would hold it and there would be a sack and Sean and the offensive line would be blamed. This was a knock
4 times a day.
Yeah, and that was a knock Pete Carroll and John Snyder had, is that people kept banging on the Seahawks offensive line. And Pete privately, I was told this for a couple of years, like, hey, those balls are being schemed up. Those plays are open. That's been the knock on Russell Wilson, is that he's very successful deep ball, the lollipop, the rainbow. He's very good rolling, and he's not a guy that turns the ball over much. Some of that, it's a little Aaron Rodgers in his prime. He'd rather take a hit or a throwaway than throw a pick. So that's not the worst thing. But when you say that has been the knock on him, I know through Sean Payton, was he holds the ball. Those are diagrammed. And I think we have to be honest about this. Sometimes it's a height thing. It is. He just left tackle 6'7".
I feel like most of Purdy's interceptions, or a large percentage of them, are tip balls. And when you're shorter, sometimes Caleb, what did he do better today? Get on the move, get outside. When you're not 6'3", it's just basic math. How are you seeing over guys that are 6'5"? the thing with Russell, like I think we have to acknowledge now, Pittsburgh's 8-2. I would say high percentage they're going to win the division.
Yes.
And now it's going to be like, hey, can they take on Kansas City and Buffalo? And well, both those two teams have good pass rushes. So can they, and obviously Spagnuolo and McDermott are two of the top defensive guys. If they can neutralize some of those lollipop throws, can Russell pick them apart? Because especially Kansas City, it's going to be hard to run it on them. You're not just going to be able to probably run for 140 yards in a playoff game. You know, you play today like that, score. I mean, all they kicked was field goals. They didn't score a touchdown.
Right. Right.
So could you beat Buffalo? Because that's where now Pittsburgh's separated of like, you're 8-2. Can you beat those teams? I would still have reservations.
Yes.
Now, could your defense would just have to have one of those games where they pick Allen or pick Mahomes off
yes.
2 or 3 times, maybe a strip sack. But I don't know if that offense that we witnessed today can beat those two teams without being a little more, like you said, I mean, explosive over the middle of the field, which is not his he doesn't do it. It's not his style of offense.
Thursday Night Football is on. It's only on Prime Video. Best season yet, packed with big rivalries and even bigger stars. Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit, Kaylee Hartung every week. Games you can't miss. Coverage begins at 7 Eastern with football's best party. TNF tonight, Thursday Night Football tonight. If you're not a Prime member, no problem. Sign up. 30-day free trial. Cancel anytime. Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details. It's time to look at this weekend's tastiest matchup. Sunday Night Football brought to you by Uber Eats. All right, let's move to Packers blocking a kick to win. Outplayed by the Bears, 20-19. Packers beat the Bears. They've now won 11 straight for Chicago. Part of that is good franchises win games they shouldn't. Bad franchises lose games they should win. The Bears dominate time of possession, 36 minutes to 23. They're great on third down. Caleb Williams, 9 rushes, 23 of 31, played pretty well, 180 yards rushing, and they lost. My takeaway in this game, though, even though they lost, and there were those that defended Shane Waldron, 2 things the Bears did today that they didn't do with Shane Waldron. They got the ball out really quick, and they got Caleb layups. They schemed layups. I've said this. Sean Payton does this to Bo Nix. He gets 7 completions to 10 completions a Sunday that are just, let's get him going. Okay, and then Bo will complete another 18 or 16, but he gets them 10. He gets some easy rollout stuff. They were not doing this. I mean, you and I were banging on this for a month. I thought the Bears, quick layups, get a rhythm. I thought they did a really good job. Forget the score for a second and the outcome. I did think Chicago's offense looked a little dynamic. It looked like, oh, that's how you should play a young quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a big step forward for Caleb, who had one of the shittier 3-week stretches you're going to see. Listen, you should throw a quick screen to DJ Moore minimum once a quarter.
Yeah.
And they started doing that. It's like, yeah, novel concept. You know, a guy that can break tackles, is physical. You know, getting a guy on the move. What were they saying in basketball, right? When your shot's not falling, get to the rim, get fouled, get some easy stuff, get a layup or get some free throws to get your rhythm back. And you get him some easy layups. What did that bring out? That brought out the Caleb that everyone had the hype on. Because the guy we have seen the last couple of weeks, it's like, where's his confidence? Why is he just sitting in the pocket? Become a playmaker. And today, I wrote down this. He started making plays with his legs. Not even just running, but running to throw, which is a huge element of his game. He's never going to sit in the pocket like Jared Goff or Peyton Manning or Phillip Rivers. That's not going to be his game. His game is going to be playmaking on the move using his arm. And whatever they did, they looked dramatically better. I mean, he looked like a player. I mean, I was starting to get a little worried.
Same.
And sometimes in football, clearly coaching, whatever they were telling him, whether they were just like getting in his head and he was playing almost too conservative, because that's what it felt like, and it started snowballing the wrong way. You went, I see. You watch him and Jordan Love on the same field at the same time. You're like, okay, this guy can be a really good player. I don't know the hype ever be like the top player in the league, but like this guy can be a top 10 quarterback, right? Yeah. But his style is going to be specific to moving around. And if you just ask him 3-5-step drop in the pocket all day long, it's not going to be his style of offense. And today, honestly, it's like you're firing your coach. Like you're not making the playoffs anyway.
Right.
I would say at the end of the day, like that sucks to be a Bears fan, that individual moment, but big picture in a couple years, help your draft pick. I mean, what was this actually going to do if you win or lose? It was obviously a huge moment for the Packers. I mean, that's a huge swing game, but it's not the end of the world that you got the field goal blocked, I would say.
It's interesting. Off a bye. Now the Packers averaged almost, 8.5 yards a play. So they're an explosive offense, no question. But it is pretty clear. You watch Buffalo and Kansas City, you watch Detroit. I no longer classify San Francisco. We'll get to this in a minute or two. But I mean, there are three teams in this league that just are different. And I think Buffalo, Kansas City, and Detroit right now, they just look different than everybody else. Yeah. Baltimore can, but in big spots, they don't live up to it. But I think Green Bay feels like they're a year away. They're still young. I like Jordan Love a lot. He was 13-17, touchdown pick. Off a bye, he was okay. I think my take on Jordan Love, he's always been more Favre than Rodgers. He's just more reckless. He is also more dynamic. But I think you're going to have to live with some of Jordan Love's mistakes because he's becoming what he was in college. If you just watch 2 minutes of his best on YouTube, you're like, this is one of the best players I've ever seen. But when I look at Jordan Love, I'm like, he goes off script a lot. And I think Matt LaFleur allows it and knows what he has. But I think as a Packer fan, like Favre, he's not Favre, obviously, but he has some Favre. There's some Favre in him. And I understand why they picked him. They moved up. They liked him. But when I watch him, do you ever feel with him, he's going to drive Packer fans crazy?
Yeah. I mean, he had an awful pick today where it sailed on him in the red zone. It was bad.
Yes.
Rodgers, for most of his career with McCarthy, one knock was always like their run game sucked. And beside like a little moment with Eddie Lacy, they did not have a great running game for most of his prime, but it didn't matter. Right? I mean, he was rattling off MVPs. This guy's going to be more dependent on a back. Partly because it just helps any young quarterback, and partly because it takes a little pressure off. Like, we don't really want you throwing it 40 times in all these games because you are liable to make a mistake.
Yes.
Where Aaron Rodgers could just turn in like, I'll throw it 47 times a day, and DB won't touch a ball. That will never be this player. But their wide receiver room. I mean, when Watson's hamstring's healthy, how good is that guy?
Yeah.
Tucker's good. I mean, they are. I thought for the most part he's pretty good today. Like I thought he had a pretty good game.
Same.
He's also just been banged up, and maybe that's just going to be something that follows his career, the way he plays.
That's what I thought when I watched the game plan today. I thought Chicago came out aggressive, smart, Caleb, quick, get rid of the ball. I really was watching the Bears all day. I thought the Bears were the better team almost most of the day. I do think there's something to be said about the Chiefs a couple of weeks ago against Denver, the Packers blocking the kick. This is what coaching and execution do. You see these little moments in games, and I think that's coaching and execution. It's not luck. But I felt with Green Bay watching them today, it was Chicago's. It was really an urgent performance needed by Chicago. I mean, like you said, it was kind of like man overboard. If they came out and looked like shit today, you'd be like, we got real problems. And I thought. And you could sense that in the game. To me, when I watched the game, I felt there was a sense of absolute urgency by Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you get to this level, it's a public job, but I think any human can relate. Like when your back's really against the wall, you really got two options. You can either fold and melt or kind of just drop your nuts and, start swinging back. And I honestly, that's what they did today. Because I would say this week, people started questioning literally everything. Before it was like, the coaching is like, well, do you guys think Caleb sucks? Your defense, you guys just quit? Hey, wide receivers, are you just over it? And this game, if this was in Green Bay, I would have a little more. I would say I understand they're coming off a bye, but this is on a road game in Chicago. They're basically fighting for their respectability. Like they're not fighting for the playoffs or anything, but they got a lot of high-priced guys, right? Keenan Allen makes a lot. DJ Moore makes a lot. DJ Moore started getting called out. Like, are you just quitting on Caleb? And to me, I thought DJ Moore and Caleb just showed a lot of like competitive fight today. I thought Caleb honestly showed a lot of fight because I was not man overboard on him, but I was like, I would take Drake May, I would take Jaden Daniels. Like,
same.
Like, this guy might like got bust territory. And sometimes maybe Shane Waldron just stinks.
Yeah, well, the Bears had more total yards. They were better on third and fourth down, dominated time of possession. So when you watch the game today, sometimes the better team, at least on a Sunday, loses. And I thought Chicago today, my feeling was they were more aggressive. They dominate time of possession. it's, we'd say this about once a month, a team loses a game and you're like, that kind of almost felt like a win, big
What happened?
picture.
It happened to Denver last week. Same scenario. You outplay them. You had a field goal to win it. It gets blocked. Yet you feel good. Now the difference is like Denver then immediately parlayed that in the day. Chicago, this might be like, this is just kind of over. Denver still had a lot to play for. But I think if Chicago's record was just maybe a game or two better, I think they could parlay this into some momentum where it's like, I don't necessarily know how I feel about them moving forward. Though I would say if Caleb plays like this as a playmaker scrambling around, they become a much more potent opponent to the Lions and the Vikings and the good teams. And they play the 49ers. Like, they're not a lock to lose all these games if they're going to play like that today with the offense.
That was this week's Sunday Night Football, brought to you by Uber Eats as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats has the best game day deals all season long. Order now for game day. This game needs to be discussed. And I swear to God, I don't want to talk about Aaron Rodgers, but Colts 28, Jets 27. So Anthony Richardson came out, and again, there was a time in America you could bench a quarterback, and it was not a headline story. They bench him for a couple games. He comes back. I thought he was very self-aware today. 20 of 30, Anthony Richardson, 272 yards, 10 rushes. Again, Colts dominate time of possession. I thought Anthony, great first down, 8, almost double the first down the Jets did. So let's just start with this before we go to Aaron Rodgers. I honestly thought you saw a little Shane Steichen. You saw a more mature quarterback. He made a couple of big seam throws today. He did. He made some really nice throws. And again, he was benched. It was appropriate. They gave Joe Flacco, a run. Joe looks kind of washed. But I've been saying this for weeks. I like the Colts personnel. They're one of those, most of the time I look at a team and I think, there's something I like, something I don't like. It's not that I don't like Anthony Richardson, because I watched today and I thought, yeah, he's the more dynamic of the two quarterbacks. He's the better quarterback on the field today. I don't think there's a question of it. Not even close. But my take is the benching, people freak out, but it happens. It happens in high school, college, and the pros. We get very sensitive now that we don't. But the kid is small town kid, one starting year at Florida, hurt a lot of last year. I watched that game and I thought, well, if this is what I get with Anthony Richardson, I could live with that. You could win games with that.
I think that moment when he tapped his head was so polarizing, and then he made it worse, I think, with his comments after the game. And clearly the teammates, they had no choice but to bench him. I did think his comments this week of saying, like, this is my job, but I have to play well or I will get yanked again, showed a little self-awareness. Yes. And there were some articles that I think they had, Kenny Moore said this captain sat down with them. Listen, this is some humans need guidance just because they play the quarterback position, not defensive line. Any other position, it wouldn't be that weird. There were moments today. There was a fumble caused on a blitz by Anthony Richardson that led to a Jets touchdown. Yeah. That I thought it kind of started to unravel on the Colts. I would say 3 weeks ago, the Colts lose that game and fall apart. On the game-winning drive, Richardson hits a play down the sideline. Yes. It's like he didn't melt. And that's I just wonder, sometimes you get to take a deep breath. The other thing, if you get it, I don't know if you saw it, but on the Colts posted out after in the locker room, as he's walking in, every guy in the locker room screaming, chanting his name, screaming for him to. So I think there was, and he like, no. Listen, sometimes as a young player, it's really difficult. He made an awful decision and he paid a price for it. He was benched. Yeah. And then today he came out, and let's face it, the Jets stink. The Jets stink. But obviously he had some great moments. He had an awesome touchdown. He had a couple. He had some great throws, but he also had some disastrous fumbles. He lost one of them, and he didn't just melt and go into the tank. So I think from a maturity standpoint, like there's no disputing there's a ton to work with there. Like, he's never going to be Drew Brees or Steve Young accuracy.
No, it's not what he is. No, but boy,
can he play some version of Cam Newton, Josh Allen, just running guys over, making some big plays? Like, yeah. He shows it when he's playing well.
Yeah, in the red zone, he's a handful, dude. He's just a big guy.
Well, because the difference, like that Lamar 2-point play, Lamar's not going to run guys over, but he's going to beat you with speed. Anthony Richardson, he gets you one-on-one like Cam back in the day. You are going backwards. He's winning. Josh does it all the time.
Yeah.
And then the other guy, one thing I wrote down today, Because I was like, he's not even a top 15 quarterback. And then I started doing, and I was like, Aaron Rodgers is not even a top 25 quarterback in the NFL right now.
Listen, I said,
how many quarterbacks a day did you watch? You went, that team, like Will Levis. I mean, it's a short list of teams that would like, we'd take Aaron over our guy. It's a very short list, Colin.
And Aaron's 22 of 29, and you think, oh, he plays pretty well. Doesn't really throw the ball down the field.
Dinking and dunking all day long.
It's Derek Carr. I mean, even the Saints pulled Derek Carr for Taysom Hill to be more dynamic. I mean, Aaron, his winning percentage with the Jets is 27%. Sam Darnold was 34%. Zach Wilson was 36%. So because I've been so critical of Aaron through the years, anytime, I said this a month ago, I said, guys, it's not the coaching. Saul is your best coach. This is a big mistake. It's not the coaching. It's not the young players. Devontae Adams is not worth half a point. I mean, Favre was 8-3 with the Jets, left and had one of the great years. Remember, he was like 33 touchdowns, 8 picks or something.
In Minnesota?
Insane.
I mean, he's a bad interception across his body from them going to the Super Bowl.
Okay. Aaron's 3-8 and looks like an old man. And we look at Favre's tenure in New York and think, what a shit show. No. I've talked to Eric Mangini about this. Like, Brett was 8-3. He brought a huge energy to New York and had a lot left in the tank. Aaron has never been known as the hardest worker in the offseason. He just hasn't been. He has a little like Cam in that he was given God-given talent and wasn't known as a grinder. I mean, like Cam would joke that he sat and ate pretzels during film room. He's like, I put on 25 pounds of pretzel weight. Aaron doesn't do that, but Aaron is not a grinder in the offseason. And, I was thinking about this today. I wrote it down. John, you can tell how hard somebody works by how they age. I don't need to see LeBron James off seasons or Kobe Bryant's. I can see how gracefully and slowly they aged. I can look at Big Ben and go, he had fun in the off season. Like, he had a good time. I can look at Cam. Now I look at Aaron and I'm like, John, he's aging really, really fast. And I think a lot of it is God gave him talent. He cultivated it. He deserves credit. But you go to that last year in Green Bay where he was off. Oh, go the year before that. MVP. What was that, 2021? Wasn't that long ago?
No. There was a throw today over the middle early in that game where Garrett Wilson was open, and he threw it way behind him. I mean, this guy was like, a Navy SEAL sniper in terms of accuracy. Because like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, I guess Tom had a good arm, but like the Peyton types, Phillip Rivers, guys that Matt Ryan hung their hat on accuracy, Aaron was just as accurate, but he threw 10 miles an hour faster, right? So he could wait till the last second. And now he's not accurate inside the pocket like he once was. The movement, part of his game, I would say the last couple years, I guess we didn't really get a chance to see him last year, but that last year in Green Bay, he wasn't as dynamic, and his accuracy didn't quite feel as great as it was in the MVP year. And clearly, when you get 39, 30, 40 years old, you're not going to be as fast as you were at 33. So he was never going to be as fast. But the Achilles thing, I don't see how we could even debate. Like, if he was a video game and his speed before, like if Lamar's a 10 out of 10, Aaron's like a 7 or an 8, in his heyday. He's like a 3 right now. He can't move. Yeah. But his whole game, like Jared Goff can't run. Let's use Cousins, a good example. I know they had a shitty game today. Cousins kind of unfazed by the Achilles because he never left a 2 or 3 yard radius. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers, half of his game was at any moment's notice, I'll take off, keep and play alive. That is dead. And clearly his accuracy, for whatever reason, maybe it's just age. Like you said, Drew Brees and Roethlisberger felt like those guys started losing his arm. I still feel like Rodgers has pretty good power, but I don't think he knows where it's going as much. And maybe that gets back to fundamentals. Well, what is the thing that Brady, all the guys had to dominate? Cousins, Jared Goff, they had to be great at fundamentals because they couldn't move. And Rodgers' fundamentals never really mattered. That's why he threw off his back of his foot most of his career, but he was so accurate. Well, now the back of the foot, he's not accurate when his feet are planted, let alone kind of freelancing inside the pocket. I just think He's just shot. He's a shot fighter. Listen, Mike Tyson's 58 years old, but he's got Mike Tyson vibes of like, I'm watching a completely different human being than I've watched for 15 years.
Well, and you never got, let's be honest, you never, with Aaron, there were some things. Somebody once said this to me years ago, a coach in the NFL. He's like, he's Jay Cutler, but he can play. You never got the best locker room guy. You got kind of a self-serving guy. You never got the most dedicated off-season guy. He was always, even in his prime in Green Bay, the passive-aggressive shots on Milwaukee radio, where he didn't like stuff. So there was stuff you always dealt with Aaron that you did. Brady just swallowed it for the team. Brady and Belichick struggled. You didn't hear anything until you saw that documentary that Gotham Chopra did, where Tom finally was, he was just where I think Giselle said he just wants to be respected. Like Tom kept that to himself for 20 years. Aaron lets you know. I mean, once he got the big contract. So now I don't get the talent. Well, you never got the intangibles. Dak Prescott gives you intangibles, but the tangibles aren't much. With Aaron, the tangibles were through the roof, but the intangibles were never perfect.
Yeah. What's funny is, I think he made some comments this week about coming back, and there aren't many industries that pay $35-40 million, which he's probably well aware of that aren't football. But he feels like a guy that, if he was a PGA Tour golfer that shot under par and now he's struggling to break 90, like how would he come back if this is what he's playing like? He can't move, so he's a sitting duck. The organization, even if they hire some new coach and he doesn't want Rodgers, it's not like Rodgers has some market. Would teams even trade for him at this point?
John, if we had last year's quarterback draft class, the Jets would move on. We don't. We have Shedeur Sanders, who the Giants will probably get, and we've got Cam Ward, who's a big risk because he plays a lot of off-platform, and there's a lot of backyard stuff. I think if it's a big if you had the class that had Burrow and Herbert and Tua and Hurts, they draft a quarterback.
But my thing is, this quarterback class is, everyone in the NFL thinks it stinks.
It's weaker by the week.
But do you think, and listen, I understand it's a lot of money. He's made so much money. He's going to want to do this again? Like this is, and it's hard. Like Peyton Manning couldn't throw, and the only reason he quit is because people wouldn't sign him. Roethlisberger and Drew Brees, their arms betrayed them. This guy's lower body's betraying him.
Yeah.
Right? To me, and it's just, you're a sitting duck. What happened to Tom that last year? Didn't want no part of getting hit. Hard to blame him. 45 years old. Rodgers, 41 years old. He's going to want to keep getting peppered when he knows that I can't run away. And my game's never been like, one thing Tom and Peyton were always good at is like hitting the ground because they always had to get used to that. Aaron's kind of uncomfortable, because even now he'll kind of do a scramble and he's like, oh, fuck, I can't move. And then he'll get taken out. And every time he starts to scramble left or right and you see a guy turning that corner, you're like, he's going to get caught immediately. And it's just really discombobulating his game because he's never had to worry about that. Because he's always been able to get outside the tackle box, keep a play alive, and throw a strike. And now that's completely dead, which, of course, he's 40 years old coming off an Achilles injury. 20 years ago, Aaron Rodgers' career would have ended that night, right?
Yeah.
At 39 years old, torn Achilles. In 1993, his career ends. So it's a testament to like modern day medicine, but I don't care how good the doctor was in his rehab of dolphins or whatever the hell he was doing. He's not even half the player that he once was.
Did you know that feeding your lawn regularly builds a stronger, more resilient lawn that naturally crowds out weeds? Scott's Turf Builder products provide a year-round feeding with essential seasonal solutions for your lawn. They have a subscription plan that makes caring for your lawn easier than ever. They put their expertise to work by analyzing the location, size, and condition of your lawn to create a custom plan for your yard, and they'll ship you the right product to apply at the perfect time. It's easy. By answering only a few short questions about your lawn, Scott's experts craft the program that's right for you in your yard. Visit scotts.com to learn more. It's really easy. Feed your lawn. Feed it. All right, this game's a corner TV game for a lot of people, but you have so much insight to the Niners. Seattle, Geno Smith runs it in with 12 seconds left. San Francisco loses to the Seahawks 2017. Jawan Jennings, that third quarter drive was huge. He's you can tell the players just love him. The fans love him.
Great player.
But San Francisco is now 5-5. Arizona looks more dynamic offensively. The Rams look like they're much better defensively with all those young defensive players. Seattle, I like Seattle's roster. I think they're a quarterback away from like being really, really interesting. Well, I wrote this down during the game. The Niners had another iffy special teams day. John, they just don't feel special. They don't feel like Philly, Detroit. They don't feel like Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. They feel much closer to Houston and not quite as good at quarterback. I mean, that's what I wrote on my sheet twice. First half, they just don't feel special.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Colin, they don't feel like a playoff team. I think today the playoffs say sayonara because they've lost 3 divisional games. They're 1-3. They've lost all 3 teams.
John, listen to this. They have the second worst scoring defense in the final 2 minutes of the second half in the league. And they brought Christian McCaffrey back. Well, he's got no TDs in 2 games. So there's is the offensive line an issue to you?
Yeah, I mean, their right tackle stinks. And they're huge on drafting skill guys over offensive linemen. Kyle and their offensive line coach have said as much over the last 6 months. They draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round, who I like Ricky Pearsall. A lot of offensive linemen there when your offensive line. Trent Williams, one of the greatest players of all time. Last time I checked, he's like 36 years old. I thought today was on Kyle. He challenged 2 plays in the second half, failed on them both. When it was pretty clear, like, yeah, that's not getting overturned. And then they had the ball with an opportunity to basically ice them out, not give the ball back to Seattle. Seattle has all 3 timeouts. So they run the ball, they get stuffed, call timeout. 2nd and 9 or whatever. Okay, they went for the kill shot. And Jawan Jennings looks like Terrell Owens meets Jerry Rice out there today. And he runs a play to ice the game to Deebo Samuel, who does not quite look like himself right now. Looks slow. Not even remotely close to being open. Purdy airmails it over his head. Thank God. It might have got picked. And then they just had to punt, and then obviously Geno drives them right down the field. The other thing is, Kittle today, who's having a fantastic season.
Great.
He's an older player. He's banged up. Can't play. Hamstring. Bosa, who's probably their best player.
Banged up.
Dealing with his hip pointer, can barely stay on the field. You could see him grimacing like he's in a lot of pain. I mean, this is just a devastating, tragic event, but Charvarius Ward's daughter passes away. He's gone. Like, they're missing a ton of top players. Ayuk's on the couch with his leg up. Like, you just can't overcome. Like, you're talking, there's a lot of money worth a player, Colin. And Kyle then has a little bit of an off day, and it just snowballs in their division now. Like, one thing you'd say about the NFC West, it's pretty competitive. If Seattle's your worst team, and technically the Niners are now, that's a pretty good worst team.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, I
Niners
said this
screwed.
is
It's over. They put their next 2 games with the Packers and the Bills on the road. Like, they're not going to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think these windows in a sport that it's like a little like hockey. You've got a regulated level of violence. Guys, older players get hurt. One of my big predictions this year was San Francisco, I felt last year, peaked, and you would see a slow regression. And I think you're seeing it. I don't think they're special defensively. I don't really blame it on Brock Purdy. I think if I was John Lynch, I would have attacked the offensive line. It was a good year for tackles. I mean, by the way, Jim Harbaugh could have chosen, the receiver from LSU, Brian Thomas. He went Joe Alt, and you can see the benefits already. Joe Alt, by the way, has had a tremendous rookie year pass blocking for the Chargers. So I think this is it's one of those things where a lot of times stuff surprises us in the NFL. I think if you were totally honest and not a Niner guy, if you were, like what you and I do for a living, you could kind of see it last year. They just felt like older players get hurt more often and they're out longer. And then McCaffrey comes back and it doesn't feel the same.
Well, what's the difference this year? I mean, last year and really the last couple of years, these games where they are dominating the other opponent statistically, they end up winning by 15, 20 points. Seattle, the Rams, and the Cardinals. And this year, they lose them all. They lose all 3 games. And at the end of the year, it's not, they're going to end up 8-ish wins, but that's the difference between being 8 or 11 and 12. And it's because the depth of their roster isn't as good. The other thing that is coming back to bite them a little bit, and it ultimately didn't impact in the last couple of years because they had Purdy and Jimmy G. The Trey Lance trade, that was 3 years worth of first-round picks. That was the Trey Lance pick. They used him. He gave them nothing, 4 games. And then the next 2 years of picks. So even if you're drafting 31, look at all the years of Kansas City or Baltimore. You trade back in the second round. You just add players. They added nothing because those picks disappeared. So their depth, some of their older players are injured, but they're missing a couple players that they would have had if they had not made that trade. that didn't sink them because they found Purdy, but I think you felt it this year with some of their injuries.
Yeah, as you talked about their schedule, I just looked it up. They have the fourth hardest remaining schedule at Green Bay, at Buffalo, Chicago Rams, at Miami, Detroit, at Cardinals. And that at Arizona game that's tough. They're
This
a
is,
tough team.
we'll see. Arizona, I mean, that guy's doing an incredible job. It's like, who would you pick right now to win the division? I guess I would lean the Rams. I mean, Geno, he had an awful pick. I can't trust him. He can have drives where he looks like a top 10 quarterback, and then he can have drives where he looks like, Will Levis. Arizona, like I think they're overachieving so much on defense. The Rams, when Stafford plays right, it's like they're hard. The crazy part about the Rams is coming in today, the last 2 weeks, they'd only scored one offensive touchdown. And even today, you're like, God, they feel a little off. And then it switched, and he had like I think 4 touchdowns and 9 completions or something. And you're like, oh, they get their mojo back. Now it's the Patriots, but you could argue it's between those two teams because I think the Niners are done. In Seattle, it's just hard to trust the quarterback. So Arizona or the Rams. And honestly, this might be a division where you only get one team in. Because I don't think 9-8's getting you the wild card because Minnesota won today. The Packers won today. So both those two teams are going to have, I would say, 11 plus wins. The Lions are going to win 13. And Atlanta's in because they won the division. And, you look at Washington's schedule. Like, they're probably at minimum getting to 10. And the Eagles are probably 12, 13 win team. So the NFC West probably only getting their division winner into the playoffs. If I was a betting man right now, I would say it's a 1 playoff division. I guess I would lean the Rams, but the Cardinals, I mean, they're tough out if the quarterback's going to play well.
All right, if I was going to name, let's talk Denver Broncos 38, rout the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins had a bad day, 38-6. So if I was voting coach of the year, Mike Tomlin would win my coach of the year. Sean Payton would be second. And Sean has texted me about 4 times this year, and I'm not going to get into everything he said, but he texted me again this week, and he said, I'm telling you, this kid's got a much better arm than all the analysts said. Colin, he can really sling it. Well, today, 4th game as a rookie, and this is a thin roster that's in cap hell, scarcity of draft picks last year and this year. 4th game of 70-plus completion percentage, 2 TDs, no picks. That ties the greatest in the modern era. Only one other rookie quarterback has done that. Bo Nix today. John, he 7 yards per play, Denver's offense. Again, this is a 5-win team. They're 28-33. Bo Nix was today. 4 touchdowns, no picks. And I want to go back. He outplayed Mahomes last week. Is that nobody is talking about Bo Nix. But if this continues, it will not be Jaden Daniels, who appears to have hit a ceiling, right? Like we've seen him now in the bigger games. Bo Nix, if you look at their schedule, it's not easy. There was one point in the 3rd quarter I looked up. He was 17-19. That's an NFL game. I'm like, what in the hell? The kid is, first of all, he is way more athletic than anybody wants to admit. And I watched his arm today because Sean had texted me and said, I think his arm is better than people think. He made a couple of throws today. And by the way, Aaron Rodgers' arm got stronger from Cal to the NFL. It happens.
Brady's arm definitely got stronger over the course.
There's no question. I watched Bo Nix today. I'm like, that's not only a franchise quarterback, that's a top 12 quarterback in the league, potentially for the next decade.
I thought the best throw so far of like his young career was the 4th touchdown where he scrambled and threw it across his body. And you're like, God, that looks like a Mahomes or Allen.
Stafford.
Rip like that.
Yeah.
And this is where coaching is so key. What did Oregon do a lot with them? Run those quick screens. Well, Sean Payton got 2 touchdowns off that today. And the first one hit and they went to the red zone, ran it essentially. I mean, it was a little different play, but essentially the same thing. Like that's coaching. Do what he's good at. Because what did we talk about with Russell Wilson? Getting the ball out of your hand fast. That's actually not an easy pass. It's in your hand off right away. Sometimes you don't even get to grip the laces. And I had a buddy text me. He's like, I put a decent amount on him at 14-1 to win the Rookie of the Year. I'm feeling pretty good. Well, I'm like, well, Caleb's out of it. And if Jaden keeps trending like this team's winning 10 games. They still got the Raiders. They still got the Panthers on the schedule.
John, they're getting
the
better.
last game is the Chiefs. Who knows? Maybe the Chiefs, don't need to play for that game. Maybe they had the 1 seed wrapped up. Yeah, their defense is good. The team's just good. I mean, that's what we talked about earlier with Caleb, where you could have a bad loss and parlay that. But Denver, deep down, like, unlike the Bears, they didn't think their season was over. Denver's like, shit, we are right there. And they came today. They beat the living crap out of Atlanta today. And listen, Atlanta's got one and done written all over them in the playoffs. That was, if the quarterback is going to be efficient like that, because I was with you, I looked up and it said 17 of 19. I'm like, this is Jared Goff 2.0 going right now.
Yeah.
But the running back, if they can run the ball and their defense plays like this, who is going to want to play in the playoffs? Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton in round one. And I both of them are going to be on the road, probably the 6 and 7 seed.
Yeah.
But you talk about playing two coaches with good defenses on the road. Good luck. And is it really shocking? We're recording this before the Charger game, but Charger a playoff team.
Yeah.
That you look at some of these teams like, oh yeah, the two coaches making a combined, $35 million resurrected the franchises. No, I mean, this league isn't that complicated. Now, both of them, Jim got Herbert and obviously Sean picked a quarterback. And I think Sean, can rub some people around the league the wrong way.
Yeah.
But he believed in the guy when, let's face it, a lot of people did not. A lot of scouts like, dink and dunk guy, he's 30 years old. And you watch him, you're like, and this is what Oregon people say. If you just take out the quick screens, watch him move around. Like, his statistics at Oregon were just pretty insane.
Also, he had multiple, I think between Auburn and Oregon, he had 5 different offensive coordinators.
He did.
And Sean's demanding. Remember how much Russell Wilson, and Russell's a smart guy. Remember how much trouble Russell had where Sean's like, dude, you have to take a wristband out there. You're remember that was a big bone of contention. Like, Russell wasn't getting the plays off fast enough.
Well, how about 2 weeks ago when he snapped on Bo Nix and Bo Nix snapped back, and then after he's like, I loved it.
Yeah. So, obviously Sean's system is not easy. Drew Brees comes on my show. He's on my show tomorrow on FS1 on Monday. And Sean has said, Drew has said, like, it's hard. Like, Sean's demanding. He will snap. And I don't think a lot of these, I'm just telling you, without giving up everything he said, Sean has, he right after they drafted him, he said, we got a guy. And about every 3 weeks, Sean will text me. He did this week. And this week he said, boy, his arm, he is snapping stuff off.
It has to be, assuming that, Coach Reed's going to keep coaching. This guy loves football more than any human alive. As long as he's healthy, going to coach for a while. How many times in NFL history have we seen, especially if they coach against each other, let's just say for like a 5-year stretch, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh? Like, good luck, Mark Davis. Go get him in that division with those 3 guys. Andy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm pretty confident if Jim Harbaugh can keep Herbert healthy and they got a decent chance to win a Super Bowl these next 5 years. And Denver, probably going to be a playoff team moving forward. You're talking about Hall of Fame coaches, like great coaches. Harbaugh has a chance to go as like one of the true great coaches of all time. How many guys can go back and forth like that? Andy's easily established himself. When it's all said and done, like in the history of the league, is Andy a top 3 or 4 coach ever?
Yes.
Sean Payton resurrected the Saints and won a Super Bowl and turned them into
in
a
one
franchise.
season. They were the worst team in the league. I think he won 11 games his first year with them, or 10 games, and he may have gotten to a conference championship the first year and lost.
I think one thing, and you saw, at the end of Sean's run, Drew Brees ultimately it wasn't as good anymore, but their defense was awesome. Harbaugh, their defense is always awesome. The majority of Andy Reid's career has been Jim Johnson and Spagnuolo, offensive coaches that place a premium on defense. And this is why, like, Kyle and McVay have had so much success. They're offensive guys, but they have no problem in spending there, investing in there, drafting there, because it makes your job easier. Like, it's a lot easier to win today when you're Sean Payton, even though your quarterback's having one of the best games of the season, when the other team's scoring 6 points. You could have the shittiest offensive performance of the year and win that thing 9-6. So offensive coaches that place a premium on defense have always been the type guy that I like.
Now for a segment called Making It Look Easy, brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Today, Jared Goff did that 412 yards, 4 touchdowns, perfect passer rating. Detroit scored a touchdown on all 7 drives that Jared Goff was in the game. Like Jared Goff making it look easy, Morgan & Morgan does the same, makes it easy to submit a claim, over 100 offices nationwide, more than 800 lawyers, with over $15 billion recovered. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound 529 to check out America's largest injury law firm. Winning in the NFL is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. So I want to spend some time on Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. So first of all, the production wasn't great. Obviously, it was kind of a mess. Listen, Showtime Sports did some great work. It doesn't exist. HBO Sports did similarly great work, both led by boxing. It doesn't exist. Boxing is not a foundational piece to build in the modern era, a sports department. That's why NBC Sports had boxing, bailed. Fox Sports had some boxing, bailed. ESPN had it, bailed. It's just too quirky and weird. And increasingly, like the clickbait, these kind of fights, Jake Paul against Tyson, it's what gets people, to the streaming platform. But it was interesting. I was watching this fight and I was thinking, what Jake Paul's done is create a business model, which is I'm going to fight big name guys, Tommy Fury Jr., Nate Robinson at the time was like amazing 2-sport athlete, yeah. Mike Tyson. And then immediately after the fight, like the next day, he's like Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And I thought it's really a business model. I'm going to fight older guys way past their prime, big name guys. If I lose, I make $40 million. What do I care? He's not Ali. He didn't have a legacy to live up to. It's a business model. Old, huge names. Even Fury's kid. Fury's the heavyweight champ. Let's go after his kid. The only fight he's ever lost. And that was my first takeaway. The second takeaway is July 20th. I mean, Mike Tyson almost died. He had like a blood transfusion in his liver or something. And when you watch the fight, by the end of the third round, Mike had no legs. It's like you think to yourself, well, it's November. It was July. He almost died. And so in the end, Mike probably should have fought in March. But, Mike probably wanted to fight. You feel good. When I had a pulmonary embolism, I'll never forget this. Not nearly anything resembling Mike, but it hurt for 3 weeks. But they had me on blood thinners for like 4 months. And I said, I just don't want to be on blood thinners. I just, if I cut myself shaving, I don't want to, have stuff. Can I just stop? They said, okay. But I remember going to talk to a doctor 6 months. They had me just do a final check. And he goes, people don't understand. Just because you don't feel something doesn't mean it's not a traumatic effect on your body. He goes, you have nerve damage. Mike lost half the blood in his body. And so I think if Mike would have fought in March, it would have been entertaining. I felt by the end of the third round, I'm like, he's done. Like that was my take. Like Mike just doesn't.
Those last couple rounds, he was just standing there. It was a joke.
So I didn't feel ripped off when I went into the sport thinking, listen, it's a circus. I compared it on Friday. It's the carnival at the parking lot at the mall in your hometown. Sometimes it goes sideways and you think to yourself, why did I waste a night of my life? So I just thought it was a mess. I kind of went in thinking 50% chance it would be a mess. It was. What was your take?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge, I think the one thing Dana White has brought to the table is obviously not all of their cards are all-time greats, but you do go in thinking, I'm going to get the best of everyone that's fighting. And for the most part, and I'm not a big UFC guy. Like I admire what they built in Dana White, but I'm not watching every card. But like, it's pretty clear, like that thing's a war zone in the octagon. I would say in my adult life, and I was born in the mid 80s, so I did not grow up on the peak of Tyson. When I was coming into my own as a kid, it was like Tyson fighting the Holyfield, Lennox Lewis stuff. And that was not the same guy that fought in the late 80s, right? In college, I'll never forget when Floyd Mayweather fought Oscar De La Hoya. And it was at the end of Oscar's prime. But it's probably one of the biggest fights of the last, 20 plus years. And it was fucking terrible. And I remember it was a big deal for us to buy it, and we were watching. It was like the most boring fight of all time. And that is the business of boxing. Is they could hype it up and get you to. We didn't have to buy it this one because it was on Netflix, which everyone owns. Why they got 60 million people watching, but they got 60 million people watching because they can hype something up. What was the last big one? When Conor McGregor boxed Floyd Mayweather. Like, it is kind of a carnival circus that you can't miss. And
Right.
when they do get the big names, I would say Dana White would die to have that. And he had it for a minute with Conor. And when I was in college, like Chuck and Tito. But it's very, very boxing for some reason can manipulate. They've got this YouTube star that you see him. He looks like he's Ray Lewis. He's jacked up and he's not terrible, but you don't know how good he is, but it doesn't even matter. His marketing is genius. 60 million people watched.
Well,
And I was reading some business guy broke it down on social media that, like, Brady, because there weren't any glitches on the roast, but they're like, that was domestic. And there were like it was like 25 million people. There's a big difference between 25 million and 60 million people worldwide. And clearly it was screwing up the service, because the NFL, when they go on Christmas, that number's much more like the roast, 20 million people than this. This was a worldwide event.
listen,
Because of Mike and even Jake Paul. Like, Jake Paul's huge on YouTube where you can watch anywhere.
I'm in bed Friday night with my wife in Park City, and I'm getting tired. And my wife is bumping me. It's like 6th round. I'm just like starting to get gnawed off. I'm like, this is bad. I can't believe this. This is bad. My wife was completely into it. By the way, Serrano and Taylor on the undercard was a fantastic fight. That was one for the ages.
The thing with like, some of the Floyd big fights, I would say, of the last whatever, and Conor and Floyd, those are pay-per-view. So, you had to spend $99.99. So usually there was like, hey, I'm spending money on this. And you always left disappointed. It's why people always complained, I think, of like the boxing, because they would get fooled into it and then be pissed off. Like, God, I knew it. No one pay. You're already paying for Netflix. So all these people on social media complaining, it's like, you could have just turned it off. Like, it's Mike Tyson. He's 58 years old. Now, if they had charged $150, be like, okay, I got fooled. I'd be pissed off. No one got fooled. And it was clear really early on. I mean, by the end, you kind of felt bad for the guy.
Oh, yeah. I thought,
he got $20 million. So, I mean,
I thought Jake Paul had real self-awareness after the fight when he said, there's just a time I didn't want to humiliate anybody. I mean, he knew, you could tell by the 5th round. Like, I'm watching in the 5th round and I'm like, oh, this is kind of sad now. The other thing is, Netflix doesn't do sports. I mean, they've dabbled in it. And I think, I looked at it and I didn't think the production was very good. I'm
a little cheesy. It felt a little like something was off.
Yeah, I'm used to Jim Lampley. But
but even UFC feels big league now, doesn't it?
Oh, there's no question. Joe Rogan, yeah, it feels world class. And I think
that crew.
Yeah, I mean, I think what UFC feels like with Dana, so I go to 3 to 4 UFC cards a year live in the summer when I have time off in the summer and I'm not beholden to sitting watching college and pro football. I will go to UFC cards and I'll buy another 5. So I probably 7 times a year, 8 times, I'm into the UFC. One of the things I always appreciated is that after a fight, I'll go in, I'll go to the bathroom in the media room, pour a cocktail or something, talk to a buddy, maybe grab a little, he'll have food in there, a chicken finger. I come out, fight starts in 5 minutes. Dana keeps that shit going. I mean, it's just, let's go. It's such a well-oiled machine with Dana. I've never had a bad time at a UFC card. I never thought I would like watching women fight. And I watched Serrano Taylor and I was like, wow, I've seen some UFC fights with women. I'm like, it's the first or second best fight on the card. So Netflix did have a pretty good undercard, but when I looked at Netflix overall, I'm like, this is a blip. This isn't 1% of their business, and they're building a sports department. And I wouldn't be shocked if they had a Daredevil event. They're not NBC Sports. They're not Fox. Yeah. That's not what they are.
Who was the guy that used to jump over the Grand Canyon? His kid.
Oh, what was that Evel Knievel and Robbie Knievel.
Yeah, the one thing I think UFC has, which I think football has this. If you're going to play in a football game, it's really hard to half-ass it because you can get taken out. In basketball, one thing, you could just kind of cruise through a month, right? Just like, I'll pass a little, shoot a little. Football, if you're going to play in the game, like, you better be ready to go. Boxing kind of has that too. I mean, Floyd, got knocked for this. Now, obviously, he's really skilled, but he could dance around. You can never touch him. You get in that octagon, man or woman, you better be ready to go because you could get legitimately hurt. And that's why I would say you watch this Jake Paul fight, hoping Mike Tyson could knock him out early, but you knew more than likely if you gave every human truth serum that follows sports, it's going to be a weird, bizarre event. When you go to a UFC event, you're like at any moment, any person, the best, the random guy can get their jaw put 180 degrees. And you know that. And I think football is a lot like that too. When I turn on a football game, I mean, hell, Florida looked like Alabama against LSU. You put the pads on, you buckle that chin strap, you got to be ready to go. And I'm not a huge UFC guy just because I really admire and appreciate the violence and the business they've built. I just don't watch it that much. Right. But I do respect what it takes to get in that. And in boxing, like, you can kind of fake it for a while. I mean, it feels like Floyd for the last 5-6 years of his career made a lot of money dancing around that ring.
Yeah. No, and I mean, Jake Paul, again, it's a business model. Go find a big name guy, fight him. The Conor McGregor fight, I'll be honest, I would watch it. I think Jake Paul would hammer. I don't think Conor can get up to that weight. And Jake Paul, he doesn't want to.
What does Jake weigh? I mean, Conor struggled to get to like 165.
No, I mean, Jake's like, let's just not even count weight. And I'm thinking, give me a break. Jake looks like
what if they each got $100 million? I think Conor might get in that ring.
I could see 50. I will say this though. Jake Paul looks like a little bit like an NFL defensive end. I mean, that's what he looks like.
Jake Paul. Here's the one thing I appreciate about Jake Paul. He takes it seriously.
Yeah.
Like, he's not showing in there with a belly, or like he takes boxing really serious. Like, whatever he's created, he has put all his chips in the middle of the table on his thing. And in terms of training, who'd I hear say this? That they watched him train, and they're like, obviously relative to like these guys in their prime, you can't compare him, but for what he is, he's really impressive. You just watch him spar in some random gym on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, good hour 20. Broke down everything I wanted to break down, buddy. Good talking.
See you, Colin.